Hello everybody. Today we're going to be going over the programming style of printing or couting, debug logging, whatever programming language you're using. This is a debugging style that can work for it. Because what this does is basically it's a debugging style that depends solely on you printing information that you want to print to your console log so that you can figure out what's going on behind the scenes. It's very similar to breakpoint, only instead of stopping the program just runs on through. This is a really good style of debugging if your program is really massive and you're trying to figure out where your program's actually passing through without having to stop and continue doing that thing throughout the whole entirety of your program. So to show this off today, I've prepared another .cpp file. This one is going to be print main, so in the main.cpp you can uncomment line 11. That's only if you're using the GitHub. If you're not using the GitHub, the program's in the description, errors included. So today we're going to be working into print main.cpp file, so you can just click on that there and it should just take you here. And what this game we're working on today is just a rock, paper, scissors game where basically you either choose to go against a person or a computer and you just input 1, 2, or 3, which correlates with rock, paper, or scissors. The other player of the computer also picks between 1, 2, and 3, and then it compares them, tells you the results, and says, do you want to play again? So if I were to run this right now, and we were to hit player, and player 1 picks rock, player 2 picks paper, we get an error. So if I want to play again, this time I play against computer, I hit paper, computer has picked 2, and we get an error. Alright, so there's clearly something wrong with our program. We're getting a bunch of errors when there shouldn't be. So in order to figure that out, what we're going to do is I'm going to be showing you the print style of debugging. So what this style of debugging is basically you go to points in your program where you feel like you could get the most information back on what's going on with your program. So right now we're getting the player input, whether that's 2 or 3, and we're storing them into these variables here. So these variables here are going to hold the values that the players put in or the computer puts in. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to see exactly what's going in there so that we can further check if the problem is in the actual getting of the information or the calculating of the information. So right here I'm going to put in P1. Let's put a space in there just to make it more readable. So what I've done here, this is not going to be in the final product of this program. Not everything you put in your program has to be a part of the final product of your program. You can put in lines of code just so you can see what's going on. And that's what this printing style of debugging is you just print out what you need to know. So right here, I forgot to put in P2. What I'm doing is I'm just looking at what these variables are and I'm printing them so I can see them and see if they're what I want them to be. And we can do the same for our, oh, messed up. We can do the same for our computer one because the computer is also messing up. Now, if I were to hit play the program, I hit 1, I say 2, 3. We see now that these numbers that we're getting are 0. For whatever reason, they're just 0. And if I play again, let's say I pick the computer this time. Oh, I messed up. Let me quickly fix that. Yeah, that happens if you put a char or a character in instead of a integer. Your program will just wig out. So we saw that player doesn't work. So if I hit 2, I hit 2. We see that we actually get 2 for the computer. Now, what's strange is with the computer, I have it printing out what you've picked or what the computer picked, and it prints out exactly what you've typed in. You can say the same thing about the player one. You can go back and you can see what you picked. These numbers down here are not the same as that because I put in 2 and 2, or the computer put in 2, I put in 2, and we're getting 0 and 2. And with our first one, you could have seen that I put in like 3 and 2, and what I got out of it was 0 and 0. So if I were to go into this, we can now see that because these numbers are wrong, nothing has happened to these variables in between the time it took to get to there. So there's something wrong with our functions, the get player input functions. So we can just leave those there because that's one of our checks, or one of our debugging checks, is just we're trying to figure out what's wrong with that and fix these variables here. And so we don't need to change that because we're going to be looking at those again. So our get player input function is all the way down here. And what this one does is it creates like 40 different new lines so that it completely resets the screen so that player 2 can't see what player 1 put in. And it prompts the user, saves it off as P, and then saves it into P. So this is another point where we can use our printing debugging style. So let me just type in, I want to be able to differentiate this, pronunciation's hard, differentiate this from the other inputs and the other strings. And so I'll put an inline there. I'll say you picked, and then P. And I should probably put in another inline. There we go. So now what this is going to do is this is going to give us back P, whatever that is, whatever we put in. So if I come over here, I hit 1, I hit 2, and I hit 3, I can see that you picked 3. So P is giving us the correct number, and we can see that here. So we can see that P is correct here, so we actually don't need this line anymore because this is okay and that works. So whatever's happening is the return of this function is wrong. So if we go down to our return, because we're not editing P in between line 95 and line 96, we can see that what we're returning is 0. So that explains why our function was still 0. So now if I were to put in P here and run our program, 1, 2, 3, we can see that we are now getting 2 and 3, and we see that this is now working. All right, so let's do it again. Let's say 2, 2. All right, we're getting an error now. The numbers are correct, but we're still getting an error for some reason. So now if let's say we go against the computer, let's say I pick 2, we're also still getting an error. All right, so there's still an error going on. We're now getting the right numbers though. So we can now remove our prints here because this problem has been fixed. That's how this debugging style works, is that you basically keep your prints there until they're displaying the correct numbers or what you want to see. And then you can get rid of them after that because now you know your program's running to that spot and running through that spot. So now we know that our calculate results is the problem because that's what that error is. In our calculate results, we can see that our error is right here. So for whatever reason, this result we're getting is an error. And it seems to only happen whenever there's a tie, whenever both the player and the computer choose the correct number, or both players choose the same number, we're getting an error. So that means there's something wrong with this switch case here. So in order to figure out exactly what's going on, let's say I want both players to pick scissors. So I'm going to do the player thing, and I'm just going to have them both pick scissors. So let's say cout hit. And basically, somewhere in our program, we're just going to get a hit written into the program, and we're going to see if it's actually displaying ties. So let's say 1, 2, 2. All right, so we are getting hit. So that means that this switch case does detect 2, and it does take us here, and it does print out a hit, but for some reason we're still getting an error, and it's still returning an error. So now let's see here. Let's just put a cout somewhere else, like right here, hit. Just somewhere else in our switch cases. Let's say 2, 2. All right, so we're still getting hit. Now, this is strange because basically if that number is 2, it should just take us here. If it's 3, it takes us here. If it's 1, it takes us here. So the fact that it's taking us to 2, running through there, we're getting a hit there. It goes straight into 3, and then we get a hit here. That is strange. Now, I don't know if y'all know how a case function works yet, but how this works is it requires breaks in between each one to step you outside of the switch case. So if I were to come in here and I add all these breaks, and then I do the have the tie, we now get the desired effect because it's now breaking out. All right, that's exactly what we want to see. All right, so now if I hit no, we're good here. So the main takeaway of this style of debugging is that you're basically just printing out what you need to know when you want to know it. So like up here, I was printing out P1 and P2 because I felt there was something wrong with P1 and P2. Now, if it displayed what I wanted, that's not where the problem is. I now know that that's safe. I can delete that print and then move on to somewhere else. And that's what this style of debugging is for, is you basically just do that until you either don't get a response, meaning that your program is for some reason not going there or going to that spot that you want it to go, or you get a wrong value displayed. Like here I was getting 0 and 0, which is the wrong value. So then I know that there's something wrong with those variables, and that happens before this point. Because wherever you type in that print, the problem is before it. It's not after it, it's before it. So that helps you narrow down where the problem is and how to fix that problem. And you can go and try this out on your own programs whenever you're just getting a wrong value, or maybe your program's not printing something or not doing something right. You just throw in a couple couts in there, or a couple debug logs, or a couple prints. Throw a couple prints in there and just have it print out the variable so that you can see how that variable is changing throughout your program and where it's not changing, or not changing in the way you want it to change. So that you can then go in there and fix whatever that problem is, and then you're all good to go. Yeah, so I hope this video has helped you learn a little something about print debugging. It's a very useful skill. I say it's probably the debugging style I use the most because it's not as invasive. Your program just runs straight through it no matter what. It doesn't hinder your program in any way, and you don't have to step through 1,000 recursions, or you don't have to step through the same for loop 1,000 times. It just runs through it and then just displays the result. All right, so hope you all have had a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.